Hello dear friends of Inside Opera and Classical Music, and welcome to a new video. The color of the theater is absolutely red. The red of the armchairs, the red of the curtain, the red as a symbol of elegance that we inherit from the opulent 19th century taste. But theater is often accompanied by superstition, and other colors are considered unlucky and often banned in theaters. Have you ever wondered why? And above all, is burning certain colors in the theater a common superstition anywhere in the world? Well, definitely not. It seems that each country has its own unlucky theatrical color, and for very different reasons. Are you ready to discover them with me on a beautiful color journey? 3, 2, 1, go! Italy. In Italy, the color forbidden in the theater is purple, both in terms of clothing, both on stage. The first reason you can imagine is to associate the color purple as a color of the Catholic Church, which uses it mainly on mortuary occasions, funerals, and so on. And in fact, if you have thought about this, you are right. Already in the Middle Ages, the color purple was associated with death, and in particular with the Lenten period, and with all the liturgical vestments of that period, just like today. The problem was that the Catholic Church banned artistic performances, especially public ones, in the Lenten period. Therefore in the period before Easter, which meant 40 days without work for artists of all kinds, from singers to actors, jesters and acrobats. 40 days without working are a lot, and for many artists it meant 40 days of hunger, since especially at that time it was already difficult to have food every day. We can understand that, for this reason, the purple has become a color to keep away from the theater as much as possible, and even today many artists are afraid of him, as if it is a sign of doom. However, there are even older origins that justify the fear of this color. In Roman times, there was a ceremony that honored spring, and it was the ceremony called Ver Sacrum, Sacred Spring. This ritual ceremony took place in periods of great famine, and sacrifices were made to the gods to ask for good luck, sacrificing the last animals that could have fed the people. And guess what? The color of this ceremony was purple. Among the great Italian artists, particularly superstition about this color is to remember the big Luciano Pavarotti, who seems to have even given up a concert at the Teatro Regio in Turin, in Italy, because the ceiling of this theater has a purple color. If it seems excessive to you, know that from an interview with his friend and collaborator Leone Magera, we know that Pavarotti really did not want to see this color. And it was better not to show up to him dressed in purple. He was able to attack you and throw you out, insulting you. And don't think that only Pavarotti was superstitious about purple, because there were many others, including Wanda Osiris. When some admirers gave her a bouquet of violets in her dressing room, she fell on eardrums in the orchestra pit because of the agitation of the nefarious sign. And although some artists careless have worn it, like the Italian actress Valentina Cortese, and many others still wear it, there are still great artists who just don't tolerate this color in the theater. Spain. If you are thinking of taking a nice trip to some Spanish theater, the color to avoid is yellow. The origin of the superstition on this color comes from corrida, bullfighting, so it has very ancient origins, especially if we think that bullfighting originated in Roman times. In fact, in bullfighting is used a large canvas cloth called capote. This drape is pink, red or burgundy on the outside, the one facing the bull, and yellow inside, the one facing the torero, bullfighter. Unfortunately, it happened, and still happens, that even toreros are hit by the bull, and sometimes they die, and the last thing they see before being eaten is the yellow of the inner part of the capote. That's why there's the great superstition in the Spanish theaters on this color. France. France also has its unlucky color, but it is not purple and it is not yellow, but green. This superstition also has ancient origins, but only apparently less ancient than the previous ones. In fact, it dates back to a precise date, February 17th, 1673. Molière was a very famous French playwright and theatrical actor even in his time, and we still remember him today as one of the leading exponents of French classical theatre. Molière fell ill of tuberculosis but continued to act on stage even as the disease worsened. It was at the very last of his strength, on February 17, 1673, that he performed in a play The Imaginary Invalid, where he wore a beautiful green costume. During the performance, he felt bad. The play was interrupted, but Molière insisted on returning to the stage. He finished the show, but his health conditions were very serious. That same night, he died in the arms of two nuns who had accompanied him home, while he was still wearing the green dress of the play. There's a legend that I don't believe in, which says instead that he died laughing while trying to say his lines. But it seems that this superstition about green has more ancient origins. During the Middle Ages in France, green fabrics were dyed using copper oxide. You can imagine the toxicity of this substance, mainly due to its instability in the case of humidity. Its use caused several deaths, and so wearing green was soon considered a sign of death and misfortune in the world of theatre. So, the green, whether for respect to Molière or for superstition as omen of death, it should not be worn in France. England. Last but not least, England, which has superstitions about more than one color. The first color to avoid in the theatre is blue. This color was in fact particularly loved by the English audience, but it was also the most expensive fabric color. In fact, getting the blue color on fabric was much more expensive than any other color. Many theatres tried to satisfy the fashion by inserting this color into the theatre, but they got into debt for it, and many had to close due to bankruptcy. The rumor began to spread that this color was unlucky, perhaps thanks to theatrical impresarios who could not buy it. However, this color was still used in the theatre, provided silver was inserted. In fact, if a theatre company could also afford silver threads in addition to the cost of the blue color, it meant that the company was rich and therefore did not have to fear bankruptcy for this expense. Know that this costume of blue with silver threads still exists today in the world of theatre and ballet. In English theatre, however, there are two other unlucky colors, green and yellow. The origin of this belief, however, doesn't derive from Spanish or French influences, but has exclusively English origins and dates back to the Elizabethan era. In fact, in that historical period, these colors were considered the colors of the devil. Yellow was associated with the destructive force of fire, and green with the wild forces of the forests. Green was also the color of fairies. Fairies, according to Celtic tradition, were fallen angels brought out of heaven by Lucifer, but who were not wicked enough to enter hell. Their destiny has been to wander the heart, often serving witches or sorcerers. These fairies are a bit different from the current collective imagination, right? But there's also another less mystical story about these two unlucky colors. In ancient times, the shows were often held outdoors and with yellow lighting. The artist dressed in yellow or green risks to blend in with the environment, which is not recommended for an artist who instead needs to stand out on stage. Nowadays, however, yellow and green can be worn in England. The important thing is that it's not a tie, jacket or hat. And about that, why? I don't know. But if you know why, write it for everyone in the comments. Now it's up to you to choose which color you want to wear to the theater, and if you want, you can always take inspiration from the Italian comedy by Peppino De Filippo. It's not true, but I believe it. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked, leave a like and a comment, and if you haven't yet done, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss the next ones.